We've got a special video today where I'm joined by Sawyer Kelly and George Honiball from Microsoft to talk about workplace analytics. So by the end of the video, you'll know what workplace analytics is. We'll have a look at some of the dashboards you can get from it and some tips about making your organization better from their experience of seeing hundreds of different companies and how they work. And we also cover how to use workplace analytics to help with Microsoft Teams adoption. So if that sounds good, then stick around until the end. I'm Gavin from MeeTime and we help organisations with modern workplace transformations. We've got new videos on Teams coming out every Tuesday, so make sure you hit the subscribe button and the bell icon to get notified every time we release a new video. If you need help with Teams training, then make sure you hit the free download link in the description below. It's access to our training deck that we've used to effectively train hundreds of people in corporate environments. If you need more help changing your organisation and the way you work, using Microsoft Teams as the start, but all of Microsoft 365 apps across their ecosystem, then make sure to book a call with us using the link below to see if you qualify to enrol in our Modern Workplace programme. So without further ado, let's go on and talk to George and Sawyer.
Hello everyone, my name is Sawyer Kelly and I am an engagement manager on the Workplace Analytics team at Microsoft, which mainly entails working with clients who use Workplace Analytics and helping them get value out of the tool, typically through 12 to 16 week consulting engagements where we work together to solve some of their business challenges. Before that, I was a technical specialist for some of our Power Platform tools, which includes Power BI, so data visualization. And then prior to that, did an undergraduate in engineering plus an MBA at Washington University in St. Louis out of the US, while also running a couple of startups at the same time.
My name is George Honiball. I joined Microsoft about 6-7 months ago. And prior to that, I was actually using Workplace Analytics as a customer. Currently, I'm a customer success manager. So what that entails is basically I just help customers take their workplace analytics to the next level. So I'll engage with them, help them with their org data file, help them to add attributes, teach them how to use additional functionality like the Power BI templates. And then if they also sort of up their subscription to things like organizational network analytics and Azure templates, I just coach them through that process, guide them and help them as well. Professionally, I've got a consulting background, so I worked with Deloitte for a few years in South Africa. Hence my accent, and then with KPMG in the UK for a number of years as well. And I'm an industrial and organizational psychologist, so I'm very comfortable with research. And from a people data perspective with Deloitte and KPMG, I worked with SAP and PeopleSoft as well. And just interesting hobbies, so I brew my own beer, and I've started taking up a little bit of acrylic pour painting as well. So in between having kids and a wife and 2 pets and a hamster to look after as well.
Excellent. I saw a bit of your acrylic painting as your background, which was very impressive. And then just for my benefit, what's the difference between your two roles on Workplace Analytics?
So I'm better looking, so I get paid more.
Yeah, obviously, like that's a given. But besides that, I think my role is more hands-on with a smaller set of clients, and typically I will work with them on more intense engagements, where George is more so, he takes on a large number of clients, and typically it's more of an ongoing relationship management and growth without maybe directly touching the data, as I often would in terms of a paid consulting engagement.
Okay. Cool.
So my engagement is much longer term. And then obviously it's also with new releases and upgrades, I will make people aware of that as well. And then if there's anything specific they're looking to do, I kind of guide them and help them along the way as well. So like Sawyer said, it's not as project-based. It's sort of more long-term.
Okay, cool. And I guess the reason I want to do this video is, well, two things really, but I guess I think like Workplace Analytics is the best kept secret that Microsoft has to offer. It seems like you guys don't talk about it very much, so I thought it'd be useful to get that out there a bit. But I guess for people that have never heard of Workplace Analytics, how would you describe it? What's it do? What's it useful for?
So maybe if I can jump in. So, I mean, I was a talent manager in my previous role, and I was obviously looking at things like succession planning and performance management and identifying people with high potential. And even though we were able to use psychometric assessments and performance management to sort of find people, it was the next layer of information that we were missing. So we didn't understand how they were collaborating, what differentiated top performers from average and poor performers, and how could we coach people to basically perform better and collaborate better. And we were stuck. We didn't know what to do. So we went out to market, we looked at a few systems, and because we were already using Office 365, when we had the discussion about workplace analytics, it just made immediate sense. And being able to use workplace analytics in combination with some of your other people data, for example, performance scores, engagement scores, we did psychometric assessments, so we had people's personality information, we had their potential measures as well in terms of how well were they supposed to progress in the business. Putting all of that in really helped to just add a new dimension to the quality of the decisions we were able to make when it came to sort of identifying successes, identifying high potential employees, and then helping, for example, poor performers to learn from the top performers as well.
Yeah, I think George covered probably the application of how workplace analytics can be used. I would say the taglines we might say would be, taking a data-driven approach to empowering employees. Someone on the team has said, finding a way to make work suck less. But essentially just using the underlying data of the way people collaborate and using that to enable a better experience, either in terms of productivity or how satisfied employees are working for organizations.
And I think what's very important, just to build on that, what Sawyer said, Gavin, is often in a lot of companies, employees specifically are very concerned about emotional decisions being made. So using workplace analytics, it just helps to make the process seem to be more data-driven. So you hopefully take the emotion out of making the decisions, and it's definitely, as Sawyer said, more data-driven. The decision-making process. And maybe, Sawyer, maybe do you quickly want to sort of just give a high-level overview of what workplace analytics is and the types of key metrics that it measures? I think, Gavin, I don't know if I'm speaking out of turn here, but we're talking about it, and I don't know how well we've actually introduced workplace analytics. And I think Sawyer is highly qualified to introduce it.
Essentially, what Workplace Analytics does is takes the O365 ecosystem, so mostly Outlook, email and meetings, and then also Teams collaboration. It takes that underlying metadata, it extracts that for employees, anonymizes it so no individual employee, you can identify their collaboration practices. You can upload different HR data so you can pair up the collaboration habits and break that down by different functional HR groupings, and then you can use that to understand the way people are working within organizations. So understand how much time people collaborate via emails and meetings, how much time they're spending externally, how much they're working after hours, the time they're spending with their managers, and get down and get into a data-driven approach to the way people are engaged and their responsibilities on a day-to-day basis. So the two things I can show to demonstrate what we just walked through, I think the first, so what we do is we can take native O365 data, combine that with the organizational context, then that comes out with meaningful outcomes. So looking at the differences in the way people collaborate on the basis of different HR groupings. You could even provide some sort of performance outcomes, such as engagement scores, to see what are the habits to differentiate highly engaged employees. Or from a sales perspective, you could look at the habits of sellers that perform better than average, and then use those to create actual insights about the way you can coach your organization to achieve better outcomes. In terms of what the actual tool looks like, I'll just take you to the home page. We could spend 90 minutes just going to this tool itself. But what we have is just a baseline tool that allows you to have some built-in dashboards, the ability to pull data out into a tool like Power BI or some other data visualization tools. And what we're looking at is typically concerned around three primary use cases. One is employee experience. So how do we create an engaging experience for employees? One is around organizational agility. How can we enable our organization to be more efficient in the way we collaborate? And the last is customer focus. And that's how can we improve how we serve our end customers or suppliers, and make sure that we're developing deep relationships with our end clients.
And what you'll find, Gavin, because it's an online tool, it gets updated with more recent information all the time, so that the tool's continually evolving and growing and developing, becoming more complex, but also easier to use as well.
Yep. So this is an example of one of the dives you can go into, but in this case, you get some baseline questions such as, are employees getting enough time with their managers? And you can see most employees in this data set are getting an average of less than 15 minutes of one-on-one scheduled time with their managers each week. You can see how many are engaged that have a high amount of email embedded. You can see how many have to take on significant after-hours work to get their work done. So these are the types of questions you can dive into on the basis of these use cases.
And I think the nice thing as well, where you see a lot of the definitions, Gavin, you'll see there's a little I button. And if you put your mouse over that, it defines exactly what the measure is that you're looking at. So it really helps a lot, helps to make sure that you understand it as the end user as well. And just when employees ask, you easily able to define what they are. And likewise, we've got a lot of Power BI dashboards that we've developed. And there's always a very comprehensive glossary that explains exactly what is measured and how it is defined as well.
Cool. Thanks for that. I think just helping see it a little just brings it to life a bit more. Well, obviously, we've worked together, and I've used Workplace Analytics before as well. I guess I know what I say to people who've got this, who might say this, but I'm interested about what you would say to people about when the employees might be getting nervous about the amount of data that people have got and how it's used. What do you say to organizations that might face that challenge?
I think ultimately it comes down to the built-in ways the tool has to enable anonymization and group-based analysis of employees. So the first thing we would say is, this is not for the individual analysis of employees. What we do within the product is anonymize the data of Workplace Analytics, so you cannot see the individual activity for any set group of individuals. All analysis is grouped at 5 or more individuals, and organizations can choose to make that threshold higher, so you only get results for a larger group of employees. And typically the way the product is enacted is making group level changes around high level practices. So I think the inability to look at the actual collaboration practices of any one person, and then when it comes to effectuating this, the fact that it's used for more higher scale habitual changes is something that we would use to probably put people at ease relative to thinking of this as a monitoring tool, which there are some in the market, but this is not what Workplace Analytics is for.
And maybe if I can also just interject, sorry, Gavin, you also as a company can choose how much data you want to upload. So I've got customers who've uploaded no personal data at all. So it's impossible to get into any detail, whereas other companies have uploaded information such as gender, because for them as a company, they want to be very fair when it comes to gender. And they've done quite a lot of really interesting research to see how do male managers treat their male and female direct reports. Is there any difference? And that is the value of Workplace Analytics, is it is you, but we've got built-in checks to make sure that the system is completely confidential and that the data is anonymized as well.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I guess picking up on a couple of points then, I remember when I was doing it in my corporate job, and a lot of people were saying, one person just kiboshed the entire meeting when we were trying to launch it because they were like, oh, they used this in my last company and they made loads of redundancies. And like, well, I don't think they did. It's probably a different product with a similar name. And two, if they did do it, they wouldn't be able to make anyone redundant because you can't find out, anything to do with that anyway. And also they're missing all the richness of being able to, do well-being and be a long-term player and all that sort of stuff. And I guess the second thing is that I never said it to anyone, but we always got a smaller group of people saying, it feels like Big Brother, you're monitoring us. And I was, obviously did a similar thing to what you said to get around that. But what I was screaming to say inside is, look, if you think it's Big Brother, it's 2020. You're getting monitored whatever you do in your personal life. In fact, we're collecting so little data at work compared to everything that's being tracked and going to UK government and American government and China probably trying to hack you the entire time. It's like, don't worry about it. At work, you're like completely safe. Just carry on doing stuff on your work computer.
I mean, if you think of logistics companies, I know for a lot of them with their trucks, they literally sort of satellite tag all of their trucks so they know where they are all the time. They know how quickly they're driving. They can see how sort of harshly they accelerate, how harshly they brake. And a lot of them have got live video cameras, 3 cameras in the trucks, one recording the driver, one recording the road in front and one recording the road behind. So, I mean, that for me is incredibly invasive. So I think the workplace analytics is far more low touch compared to those types of things. And even using the London Underground, I mean, apparently you can be viewed over 300 times when you just go on one trip using the public transport in London. So there are cameras everywhere. So I agree with you. Sorry, Sawyer, I interrupted you.
So I guess I only had 2 things. One is that I think you started using the tool, Gavin, in 2018, and the tool was launched, I believe, in July of 2017. So I think the person's statement he made about the redundancies, if that was a year prior, that's like technically impossible because the product wasn't launched at that point in that form. But I would say in general, the actual benefits of the tool, typically organizations are looking to do things like reduce the amount of after-hour activity that people have to do, or reduce the amount of time spent in long and highly attended meetings, or making sure that managers spend enough time with their employees. So while there are, I guess, risks that you could perceive, typically it's only going to end up benefiting the employees because they're trying to instill healthier workplace collaboration that's backed by research in terms of making sure employees are having a good and productive experience at their work. So,
yeah. And for example, Gavin, with the lockdown, one of the most profound findings we've made is that during this lockdown period, we're finding that managers are really taking their employees for granted, and they're not spending the normal amount of time that they usually did with their employees. So we found a huge percentage of managers do not even spend half an hour with their direct reports once every 2 weeks. Which was really shocking for a lot of companies. And the one company I was with, it was 90%. So they said, oh, so only 10% of our managers don't do it. And I said, no, it's 90% of your managers that aren't even spending 15 minutes a week with their direct reports. And they were shocked. So, I mean, that really coaches your managers. You can go back to them and say, you are not managing your people. You're not engaging with them. You're not creating a safe space to speak one-to-one with them. And as much as managers can say, well, we have departmental meetings, unfortunately, you need to have that safe space at least. I mean, I have a meeting with my direct manager for half an hour every week, and it just gives us an opportunity to really connect and share. Whereas in a group discussion, you're not going to have that same level of intimacy and openness to be able to speak up. So I think these are the types of things to build on what Sawyer is saying. It's very much a coaching and a positive tool. It's not a tool used to police and micromanage, not by any means.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's getting that data, that just going back to the basics that people just tend to forget when everyone's so busy. You know, the amount of meetings and the ease of collaboration actually sometimes means that the one-to-ones sort of drop off, but also then you're just getting bombarded by really big meetings, really long ones. And that's the data that really helps and, helped us in the past. So obviously we're part of the Workplace Analytics community, and we have different organisations presenting their results back and how they got on and all the good stuff they're doing with Workplace Analytics, of which obviously I was grateful to do as well in my time. Is there any client that you've got that comes to mind that got like great results? Maybe yourself, Georgia, because you flipped.
So maybe I can just share. So my job as a talent manager was basically to put people into a 9-box matrix from a performance perspective. So what we basically did is we took all of our employees and we were able to map them on this 9-box matrix. So what we did basically is on the x-axis, we had their potential, and by potential, this was based on their psychometric assessment results. So this basically indicated to us the likelihood that these people were going to grow and grow fairly aggressively in the business. And then on the y-axis, we had their performance. And obviously their performance is based on the feedback from their managers and from their peers. So either they were below meeting or exceeding expectations, and then from a potential perspective, they had low, medium, or high potential. So for me as the talent manager, my main area of focus was on the top four quadrants. So that's where people either have medium and high potential, or we're meeting or we're exceeding expectations from a performance perspective. Now, we couldn't really, this gave us the information, but I didn't know what to do with it as a talent manager. And specifically, the people as an industrial psychologist that really concerned me were the people that had high potential but low performance. So these are people that we've identified as rough diamonds over here. But I didn't know what to do with them. I don't know why they were in that situation. I didn't know if it was a bad recruitment decision. I don't know if it was a relationship issue with the person and their manager. We weren't sure what to do. So after implementing workplace analytics, we took all of the different measures that you could use. And I mean, there are, I think, about 160 different measures. And using statistics, the two measures that correlated the strongest with the performance scores and the people's potential was the internal network size and their collaboration activity. So what we found is that when it came to their internal network sizes, you can see that the people that were exceeding performance expectations and had high potential, on average, they were engaging with 49 people per week internally, whereas your strong people with high potential, but that were performing below par, only were engaging with 16 people on a weekly basis. So you can see there's a significant difference in their internal network size. And then when we look at their collaboration activity very similarly, the people in the magic quadrant, the sort of meeting and exceeding expectations and medium to high performance, they were averaging between 12 and 15 hours of collaboration internally per week, whereas your people with low performing behavior but with high potential were only spending about 9 hours per week collaborating. So what that told us basically is that it's very clear that these people need to engage more. They've sort of alienated themselves from the business. And from a coaching perspective, you know exactly what the manager needs to do to try and assist and coach and help these people that have got great potential, but are not living up to the expectations that we have of them. So yeah, I don't know if you've got any good examples. Top that.
Yeah, you have the real data behind it. I think a lot of my examples tend to be ones that can't be shared by customer names specifically. But I would say typically where I found a lot of value to be had for some of the customers I've worked with is on the basis of their relationship with external customers. And typically we would divide this into three groups in terms of habits that you can change. I think something that we've seen time and time again by doing an analysis that takes people who have exceptional sales performance and then comparing them with the out-group sales population, things to stand out are typically high performers get a lot of coaching in one-on-one scheduled activity with their managers. Additionally, they also tend to be pretty well connected internally. This is a little counterintuitive because I think there's a lot of complaints that a lot of sellers spend too much time internally and don't get enough time with customers. And it's not the case that these sellers have a lot of time internally. It says that they have very diverse networks internally, but maybe not super deep relationships internally. But they have those networks that they can go to get support or get questions answered. So they have a wide base of people to rely upon. And then, of course, as you might expect, they do have a lot of time spent with customers. Typically, though, it's not that they have a wider set of people inside their customer networks. It's just that they've established very deep relationships with a small number of customers. So typically they'll have around the same amount of network sizes as populations that maybe are not as strong performance-wise, but they just spend a lot more time per person. So these are some insights that we've shared and seen time again around 3 or 4 clients based out of EMEA. So having these practices instilled via managerial dashboards that allow either sales analytics groups or high-level managers within sales organizations try to instill these habits and see improvement rise, I think has been really empowering to see. And then also on the back of the customer focus use case, you can actually, using CRM data, tie collaboration to specific clients based on the domains upon which those customers are based out of. So being able to take a data-driven approach to, how much time are we spending with each individual customer and tying that back to opportunities, I think is a really powerful way to add some quantitative information to your qualitative experience you have with clients.
Yeah, excellent. And I guess like one of the benefits of being in workplace analytics and being part of the community is, I guess, Microsoft is the biggest user of it, as well as being the provider of the products. And then Microsoft, are very open in sharing the data they found about themselves to help people work better, even if they haven't got their own data. Just remember seeing one from Microsoft about the amount of time it takes someone to get up to speed in their job. And obviously Microsoft is a huge company with lots of different things going on, maybe TikTok as well coming up. But just the amount of people that you needed in your internal network to be a solid performer was just really eye-opening, and then sort of made that point that you just made.
Yeah, and in highly technical sales, it's not uncommon for it to take 2 to 3 years to develop the network size that's typically indicative of really high performers, which I think is counterintuitive, but pretty interesting that it takes that long.
Yeah.
And I think the other tool, so the sort of child of workplace analytics, which you could kind of see as the parent, is the MyAnalytics tool, which is available to most employees that are using Office 365. And the MyAnalytics is a wonderful coaching tool that you can use for yourself to monitor your time, to look at your internal and external network sizes. It literally drills down into so much information. And I use it on a regular basis to just monitor my time, monitor that I'm not working overtime too much. I mean, obviously there are demands in these crazy times, but you need to almost sort of keep yourself in check. And I think it's a really tool. And I know of one lady, a customer, who literally on a weekly basis has a chat to her manager using her MyAnalytics tool to sort of track how productive and effective she's been. So I think that's also for coalface users that tool is there. So Workplace Analytics is there for the leaders of the business, but MyAnalytics is also there for us as sort of the normal employees to be able to use on a weekly basis as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if Workplace Analytics is the best kept secret, I think MyAnalytics is the second one. Because it's just there in people's email, but people just don't tend to click on the links. I think it's amazing. I used to use it for making sure my network is up, and if I want to get through the organisation, making sure I've got the touch points with the senior leaders in the business, and then if you can see it dropping off on the little radar chart, you're like, oh, I need to get back in and do something with that guy.
You assume people know how to use it and it's right there, but a lot of people, like you say, Gavin, it's a best kept secret. People don't even know that the functionality is there.
Absolutely. And the focus plan thing, absolute gold dust.
Brilliant.
Blocking out time in your calendar for you before it gets taken really up. Awesome. I guess I'll just segue to that. I was going to ask about the link between Workplace Analytics and MyAnalytics in terms of pushing out solutions. If you could just explain to people a bit about how that works.
Sure. So I would say that typically there's a varying degree of difficulty in creating change within an organization, and often surprising is coming up with the insights. Although it's difficult sometimes to do data analysis and come up with what are the changes you want to see in the business. That's possibly easier than actually cascading those changes and seeing them take effect, because that requires a lot of effort and it requires a lot of time. So I think what we've decided to do with Workplace Analytics, MyAnalytics, is try to create a built-in way to make it easier to cascade change throughout organizations. So what we do is, as was alluded to earlier, MyAnalytics is a completely personal product, a way we sometimes describe it as like a Fitbit for work. So it's your own personal data. But what we can do is pair up anonymously, but assign people to different plans in Workplace Analytics that go after certain goals. So the focus plan is to increase the amount of time that individuals have to complete work without being interrupted by meetings. And people can get nudges through the plans program within Workplace Analytics. And then using those, you can track the performance of an organization over time and the adoption of certain habits, and then hopefully see those take effect over a 12-week or so period. I know there was an organization I worked with out of the US about 2 years ago. It was an IT organization that just had a ton of time spent in emails and meetings. And these individuals didn't have enough time to do their jobs as essentially IT developers. So there was a plan put in place to reduce the amount of collaboration time for those employees. And what we ultimately found is that the average employee, I think, saved about 150 hours per year, so a couple work weeks of time. It amounted to about 45,000 hours in a 500-person organization, so like 22 or so FTEs worth of time, by just being a little more conscious about the way you choose to schedule your meeting and email activity and only including necessary participants.
Awesome. I mean, just those numbers are huge, aren't they? From just a small tweak, with 500 people in, it's a big amount of time. And I guess people's job, if they're a knowledge worker, has turned into doing emails and meetings. But then everyone moans about doing them, and no one actually takes the time to do anything. So having that nudge and being able to identify the people, the worst culprits that are sort of pushing that on everybody else, and being able to target them and give them a nudge, I think is just so valuable.
Yeah, collaboration is necessary for success, but it's not sufficient, and it shouldn't be the part of the organization to encourage collaboration for the sake of collaboration. There should be some sort of end to the reason for that collaboration.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess, is there anything that Workplace Analytics did for a client that you didn't expect? Someone got a surprising result.
So I think if I can jump in, so I think the sort of hidden gem for me with Workplace Analytics, and a lot of people struggle to understand this functionality, is the effective dating element. And what data basically allows you to is you can hop into a time capsule and you can go back a few months. I think with Workplace Analytics at the moment, you can go back as far as 12 or 13 months and sort of look at historical data and see how people's behavior has changed over time. Because sometimes change happens and you don't expect it. For example, even with this lockdown. So what we can do with our business continuity dashboard, we didn't know it was coming, but Office 365 was tracking people's collaboration. So you can go back and see how were people collaborating before the lockdown. And obviously there's a few weeks of transition, and then you can see what the new normal looks like. And I'm sure you'll be using Workplace Analytics to see what the new normal is going to look like as well. So as people get back into the workplace, we can go back and measure and see how has collaboration changed over time. And I think one of the most profound tools that we've seen changing is the uptake of the instant messaging tool in Teams, where in the past, it was people talking at the coffee stations, chatting in the parking lot. Now, everybody's using instant messaging. So instant messaging usage has just gone through the roof.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess that's data that you will have never seen before. The only time you really see, a problem is that the employees start leaving, and even then you don't really know why.
Exactly, Gavin. And I mean, we often implement change just for the sake of implementing change. And it's very difficult to measure return on investment. But with Workplace Analytics, you can see tangible evidence of a positive thing. For example, if you're shifting two departments that interact a lot with each other and you move them physically closer to each other, you can measure and see how has this saved in terms of time, in terms of communication, how has that actually improved and made things better? If you downsize or improve the size of departments, how is it improving, for example, the service that you're able to give to your customers? How are levels of improvement changing? Has it had an impact on performance? There's so many different things that you can do. And just building on something that Sawyer said a little bit earlier, if you are measuring performance, the lovely thing with Workplace Analytics is you don't need to only measure the overall performance score. If you've got subsets of performance that you measure as well, you can include those elements in the reviews as well. So you can upload the sort of peer review feedback, the manager feedback, and even customer feedback into that process. So that gives you even additional opportunity to drill down in a lot more detail. But obviously, as I mentioned earlier, everything is aggregated. We don't want to know how individuals are doing. It's very much based on sort of teamwork and teams collaborating together.
Yeah, absolutely. I know there's one particular person in the Workplace Analytics community that was quite big on trying to get an ROI for his licenses. And I guess at some point you've just got to, doing the right thing. If you're trying to make the workplace better for people, you've got to just believe that is the right thing to do. just like not polluting a river. There's no real ROI to not polluting a river until you get come and bashed over the head. I guess the bashing over the head is that you've got no people working for you anymore.
Exactly.
Yes.
And even like learning and development, people are always saying it's such a challenge, sort of justifying the return on investment for training your people. But the problem is if you don't train your people, what's going to happen in the next sort of 2 to 5 years? Either people are going to leave or people are just not going to have kept up with technology. So, sorry, Sawyer, you wanted to say something?
Oh, I was going to say, ideally, it would be great to have every single initiative directly tie A to B. But in things of like using workplace analytics to grow revenue, yeah, you can tie it to a certain extent, or at least look at quota attainment. But there's things like COVID, different external factors are going to have such a big influence. Same thing with individual employees. The reason managing knowledge workers, which is what workplace analytics is for, is so difficult is because you can't measure the amount of an individual item or widget produced. But doing those things like increasing the effectiveness of onboarding, raising the engagement scores, those will have some outlying effects and just the good your company have that can sometimes be a little difficult to measure. But then there are ways to do that by hopefully looking at reduced turnover can be one example, or just looking at the amount of hours saved in terms of capacity of employees. But I would agree that some of this stuff you as an organization strategically have to decide, are you an organization that's for productivity or engagement, or do you need to have a certain quantification for every investment?
Yeah. I guess we touched on a little bit where obviously you're starting to get some data about how people have changed over the current global climate. And I guess they've started to shift onto Teams a bit more. I've been speaking to organisations that have just been sort of forced into video chat and Teams. I guess how can people use workplace analytics to aid with like a modern workplace transformation or to monitor Teams adoption?
So there's actually recently released a Teams adoption dashboard. So there's a tool within Workplace Analytics. It's a Power BI dashboard that comes out that's automatically generated that looks at the adoption of the Teams platform by different groups. And then you can use that to spur higher adoption. So this, in terms of tool adoption, Workplace Analytics is built in that allows you to discover that. Additionally, we do have some changes coming to the metrics that have created more metrics on the basis of collaboration within teams. So we have IMs. I think we should also have channel posting as well. So you can get more effective understanding of how people are leveraging Teams in the near future as well. So we have seen across almost every single organization, the amount of adoption of Teams has just been incredible. And just how much the use of the tool has risen since people have not been together in the office.
Yeah. I think it's been a lifesaver for a lot of organizations. What's the most important thing you've learned working with clients on transformations using workplace analytics?
I think if I can jump in, I think for me, it's being very careful of jumping to conclusions. I think it's very important if you think you found something in your workplace analytics data, you just need to do a sanity check. And just make sure that you understand the information, that you've cleaned up the data adequately, and that you really understand the audiences that you're working with. So, for example, before you start running to the board or running to the CEO with a story, maybe check with the manager to make sure that what you think is really what's happening in that department, for example. Because I think you have these hypotheses and you get very excited about these findings, but there might be a reason for it. For example, in sales teams, for example, outbound contact centers and inbound contact centers, some teams communicate exclusively with emails. So obviously that does tend to skew some of the data. And it's important to factor that in and bear that in mind as well. And then also sometimes, for example, people don't switch off their computers at night or their time zone settings are incorrect. So you might jump to conclusions, and you just need to be aware that sometimes there are unusual anomalies. So just be aware of outliers, be aware of jumping to conclusions. And I think go into it as any good scientist would do, with an open mind, and use the research tools available to you. I mean, Excel is wonderful when it comes to using correlations and statistical functions to help you in making true, real data-driven decision-making when it comes to people data analytics.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess it's, as I say on our program, there's so many apps and tools available in the Microsoft 365 suite now. It's like, don't forget good old Excel. That's your go-to friend to do some stuff in there. Yeah.
I think George hit upon some really good points around just making sure you understand the intentional strategy and culture of the way organizations have chosen to design their organization, because the data is only powerful in context of how the organization is desiring to act. I think what I would say is what I've seen as a common thing is a bit of a Pareto principle around some of the value that's gotten out of workplace analytics. I think a lot of times organizations love just doing analysis upon analysis and seeing really cool things. But I think a lot of times 80% of value that you can get out of certain use cases can come out of 20% of the insights. So like, let's say in certain cases of engagement, manager one-on-one time is really important, and reduce the amount of time spent in large and long meetings. Those are two things that tend to correlate really highly with ineffective, but definitely employees who don't feel very engaged in organizations. If we just said as an organization, hey, let's not go really deep and understand all of this different factor analysis and these really powerful regressions, but let's just like put in a goal to make sure that every manager spends time with their employees on a monthly basis, and we keep the threshold of long and large meetings under a certain threshold. If that's all you did for your organization, you're going to have huge benefits. So I think a lot of times there's a bit to like, I think to a certain extent, perfect is the enemy of good. So a lot of times just taking a couple of foundational things and making a really concerted effort to push those forward as a step one, and then growing upon there, that can be nice, but really just taking in the most important things first, prioritizing those, and then growing over time, I think is something I'd recommend to most organizations. That's where I've seen the most success, instead of trying to bite off everything at once, just trying to focus on some foundational stuff and then growing upon there.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess I always well, I still do include it in a lot of my presentations, but definitely when we're talking about workplace analytics, whose name just escapes me, but he was always had a quote up before we started saying, if more knowledge was the answer, we'd all be billionaires with perfect abs. So you don't need to get all the data, you just need to take some actions. Let's just focus on the actions we're going to do.
That is the perfect embodiment of that message. It's like sometimes you have enough information to make some good change. Sure, some more can help better, but like taking action sometimes on the back of some foundational stuff, not overstepping what the data tells you, can be helpful.
Absolutely. Great. I guess you guys have seen a lot of different organizations and seen a lot of their data through workplace analytics. If you had to give someone one tip for making a better workplace for employees, what would it be?
So I guess I can go first with this one in terms of making the experience better for employees. I would say just like understanding what type of organization you want in terms of your culture, and then having a couple of key factors to define that over time. You know, managing organizations is incredibly difficult, which is why there are hundreds of universities and billions of dollars generated per year in consulting fees dedicated to creating efficient organizations. But I think just defining a couple key cultural goals that you want in an organization and being able to monitor and improve the metrics that'll really move the culture in the way that you want it, I think is a really great step to getting towards that, I guess is what I would say. So to a certain extent, don't overthink it, and then just make sure that you're keeping a track record of the changes you're putting in place over time.
I think for me, what's very important is I've seen a lot of noise generated by people not keeping their data clean and tidy. And we're dealing with people. We must never forget that. And the wonderful thing about people, and that's why we will always have jobs as sort of people professionals, is that people are they don't want to be predictable. So you can never predict really what's going to be happening with the people. So I think if you're using people data, it's very important that you keep it clean, that you keep it neat and tidy, and allow for complexity. Like I said a bit earlier, don't jump to conclusions. Be open-minded about it. And I think specifically what we see all the time with MyAnalytics and with Workplace Analytics is that relationship between the employee and the manager is the building block of success in the business. You cannot have good employees if you don't have good managers in place, and managers that are equipped to make good decisions as well. And I think that's the wonderful thing is workplace analytics tools are used to provide managers with feedback on how they can perform better and equip their employees to give better performance as well. So I think that's in a nutshell what I would say about that.
Yeah, great. Perfect. Thanks, guys. And I guess where should people go if they want to find out more information or if they want to get their organization signed up to join?
I'd say insights.office.com is where I would start out because there's a lot of great articles and case studies on the site about how organizations have used workplace analytics to create positive change.
Because if you've got people that are very academically inclined, Gavin, those are really useful. We do have managers that want to know the details, and that really speaks to that it's thoroughly researched and there's good science backing up the way that workplace analytics has measured these things.
Okay, great. Well, I can link that in the video description so people can jump straight to it. And if they want to start workplace analytics, do they just speak to their customer success manager?
Well, I would recommend they reach out to their Microsoft representative. If you're an enterprise customer, it's likely you know who that may be, or get in contact with your IT department and they would know for sure. And typically that would be through someone like an account executive. Otherwise, there is a contact page within the Office site that can get you in touch with the specialist you would have that can help cover that tool as well.
Yeah, and just for my benefit, is do people have to have an enterprise license to get it? Or
no, not necessarily. I think you have to generally have an organization of above a certain size, or it probably won't be super useful. In terms of the ongoing support, typically we want to have organizations that have 1,000 or more licenses in terms of management, but organizations smaller than that can and do use it pretty often for analysis as well.
And I guess they can still pay for that fast track.
Yes, they can pay for fast track on top of that as well.
So people could get it through a business premium license.
They could.
Okay, cool. All right, great, awesome. That was I think that was really good, guys.
And thanks for the opportunity, Gavin.
No worries.
Yeah, this is fun.
Yes, really good. Obviously, we're not caught up for ages, so it's nice to have a catch up as well.
Brilliant.
So I thought that was a great little overview of workplace analytics. Let me know in the description, are you interested in joining? Remember that you can find more info at insights.office.com, and that's linked in the description below. It's got access to loads of Harvard Business Review articles, goes through all of the background and all of the data and science that's used for some of the metrics that go along with workplace analytics. Remember to give the video a like if you liked it, and hit the subscribe button and the bell icon if you haven't already. If you need help with Teams training, then click the free download link in the description below, and click book a call link if you want more help unlocking all of the benefits of the modern workplace in your organisation. Thanks for watching so far, and we'll see you in the next video.